Thank you so much for all your time, and thank you for taking time out to meet with the inquirers. We'll get into some of the questions um, as we wait for some of the other panelists to come in. One of the intentions for the second session for the panel was to not really get into your individual practices, into your expertise, but to rather have more personal and philosophical sort of conversations that are easier for the larger public to sort of engage with and connect with, since they've had the opportunity to get an insight into your practices through the inquirers. And at the beginning, I thought the first question we could begin with is, what is your personal relationship with nature, and when did it begin? Is that something that started early on, or is that something that sort of developed over time with an event or with time? And I'd like to begin first with Aruna, if I may.
My goodness, this alphabetical order always disadvantages me. But yeah, my personal relationship with nature, I grew up in a city of cyclones. I was born in city of Vizag, so the family story is always that oh, everyone, I can sleep through a cyclone. Yes, so kind of growing up there, I also had very strong memories, and I blame my grandfather for this. So we'd come home for the summer holidays, and he would, in exchange for walking on his feet, our present or our prize was, he would tell us stories, and he would tell us stories of the man-eaters of Kumaun, and the great jungles, the great big white hunters of yore. And tell us these stories of man-eating tigers and leopards and what that was like. So my brother turned into a conservation biologist, and I became a storyteller, and we interchanged roles sometimes. So that had a really, really profound effect on us. And of course, having a older sibling who says things like, every time I would say, "Oh, this animal is cute," he would be like, "Don't anthropomorphize wild animals. It's a beast. It's a wild animal that has its own agency. Stop putting words like cute next to it." So I was like, okay, I don't do that. So yeah, so my relationship and sense of awe grew with that, and having a sibling who's as equally understanding. Later in life, my reconnection happened through this, or wanting to do environmental journalism, as I was looking at Bollywood videos and scrolling through that as part of a social media and content job. I was wondering what I was doing in my life, and realized that most of that India's civil war was being fought. It was a war for, they would call it green hunt, and that was the most bizarre way to describe what was happening. And I realized that from pictures of what was coming out, I didn't know that there were indigenous people who lived so close to where I did. I didn't know that there were communities who had relationships with land and forests. And like, oh, okay, right. So this is my backyard. Why haven't I seen these places? This is why haven't I been there? Why aren't their stories part of my history textbooks or my environmental textbooks? So yeah, that's how my journey began to go and see for myself. And that's a relationship, and it became for me an exploration in caste and privilege. So yeah, of understanding where my water came from, my resources came from, my energy came from, and that's and where is power and how is power embedded in all of this. Yeah, so in short, long and complicated history with nature. Yeah.
Hey, thanks. Did you like to go next? Would you like to go next, Vanessa?
Sure. So I'm based in Lausanne, but I'm originally from the Basque Country in Spain, and it's very, very, very industrialized area. And I remember that when so it's a mining area, but also very highly productive place of automotive industry. We can make a car in this small region, and when I remember, like when I was all the weekends, we were either in the mountains in winter or at the beach in summer. So I was lucky to grow up in a very close to such an amazing natural scenery. But I remember that when I was in the mountains just near my house, like about 10 minutes by car, or there is a little lake, and one weekend it was gone, and I learned that because of the mining, they drilled in the wrong place, and it just the whole lake was almost gone. And we are lucky that it's a very rainy area, and it was filled very quickly. But that I remember that was that blew my mind. Like also at the ecological level, how all my family was working in the industry, and we were all loving nature, but at the same time that was not very sustainable, right? Because of the fact that there are consequences. And so I guess I became interested in nature and fixing somehow our very complex relationship to nature somehow.
Thank you for that. Mr. Herdiger, I'd love to hear from you, since a good part of this program has been thanks to the support of Pro Helvetia and the Swiss government. I'd love to hear from you also, both as well, your personal relationship with nature and what you'd like to share with us also.
Well, frankly, I have a very strong bond and relationship to nature. I really grew up in a very on a farm actually, and I'm a country boy actually, and so nature is very dear to me. And just like quickly to say a few words also to the program, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address you briefly in this panel and virtual room. It's on behalf of the Swiss Embassy in New Delhi and the Consulate General in Mumbai that I really like to express our gratitude that Switzerland is associated with this critical conditions, the Mind of Nature, which is a quite extraordinary program. And the participation of a large number of inspiring personalities from various backgrounds clearly stands out in terms of the format and the relevance of the content. And I followed part of the program, and I was impressed by the quality of the speakers and the discussions. And I like to congratulate simply, and in particular also the curator Shaseb as well as Pro Helvetia for partnering, selecting not less than 9 artists, environmental experts from Switzerland for this symposium, and some of them are obviously here in this panel. And I really thank them for enriching the discussion with their perspectives and knowledge. And the mind of nature is faithfully linked actually to the human mind, and the human mind offers us infinite possibilities and spaces, and used in a positive way, it allows us to reach the seemingly impossible. And this is exactly what I feel will be needed to preserve our planet, and planet how we love and how we know it, for the next generation. And as you know, India and Switzerland, we are strongly committed to the SDGs 2030. But we are also all aware that it will take a huge collective effort to reach the SDG environment goals. And the clock is clearly ticking, and we must use this decade and act fast. I like that this symposium provides a platform for an informal exchange of knowledge with actors from various countries, and knowledge sharing, cooperation across borders is just the right approach to address our common challenges. For me, research constantly provides a huge variety of findings in ecological topics, and for the broad public, and I'm part of it, it becomes more and more challenging to correctly assess the relevance of these findings. And I see sometimes a danger in the flood of information and misinformation, the complexity of the matter also, as well as of course, the obvious short-term economic interests that could prevent us from recognizing the essential, and ultimately also deter us from taking the right decisions at the right time on climate change, sustainability, waste management, biodiversity, and all these other pressing issues. And I have to say that I liked also very much the approach of including artists and non-scientists in the discussions. These are creative, inspiring minds who shed light on ecological issues from a different angle and make it accessible also to the general public. And we all know that the general public plays a crucial role on the road to ecological and sustainable behavior. And we need a broad public support, as much, of course, as the commitment from politics, economy, and science. And therefore, I really, it was great that the audience could directly interact with all these experts and join in your discussions. With this, I don't want to take more of your time. I thank all involved for their great commitment and to raise awareness and awareness of nature, of the environment here, and of course also in all your daily activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for tuning in. And of course, also thank you for your support. I would love to hear now as well, in continuation, from Shikhar and Blanca, your relationship with nature. Was it something that developed over time? Was it something that you were introduced to very early on?
Maybe Blanca can go first, or
Shikhar, why don't you take it?
Okay. Well, yeah, I was thinking about this question. I was like, maybe they won't call upon me to answer it, because honestly, I didn't develop the feeling of being part of a larger organism, of understanding that the self is part of the larger self, which is the earth, which is nature, which is other humans, non-humans, until maybe like 1 year ago. And I think I did grow up being exposed to nature to varying degrees. Also, although I largely grew up in cities, we would I'm from a very privileged background, so we would take holidays, go to places, and I think I've been exposed to it. But I think my connection to environmentalism grew more out of the anthropocentric thinking of we need to save the world. And then as I followed up on that emotion and that sort of inclination, I realized that that's silly to want to save the world, and that we are just one tiny life on this tremendously complex planet, and it's about trying to restore that nature and restore the balance with nature, and trying to figure out how are we going to consciously co-evolve with other species, with all the fecundity that is this planet. So I would say that my relationship with nature is very intellectualized and not as visceral or emotional yet, and that's just, I think, the kind of person I am. But I think gradually I'm trying to really feel grounded, and really feel like I'm nature, and nature is me, and we're just one organism, and we're all tiny parts of it. Sorry, maybe I took the philosophical too seriously, but yeah.
No, entirely. We actually did get into some of these questions yesterday as well, and that actually prompts my next question, and perhaps some of the others can pitch into this, which is, are we really a part of nature? And what then does that sort of involve, that question? And I was wondering if Dr. Anil could answer that.
Well, I would say that I come from the Himalayas, and working Himalaya is not my passion. It's a compassion. I know what happened in the Himalayas that make me to work for my community, and I believe that nature should not be understood the way we are currently doing. You see, it's the kind of a mindset that we have. We have been trying to consume nature all time, but we do not contribute. We do not know the principle of nature, which says that consumer must be a contributor. Now find out who consume more. If the Himalayan community do not consume, but they are saving for others. And if the consumers are more of the urbans, and not merely the consumer, they are very detrimental for the Himalayan system, the way the climate change, global warming coming up. And ultimately, the problem is the saviors are sufferers. The economic disparity, people took advantage of Himalayas, their river, their resources and everything. But at the same time, they did not take advantage of the economy of those resources. But ecological disparity is also coming up. It's not only with the Himalayas, because the Himalayas is still not unheard Himalayas, I will call it all time. So in fact, we know very well the nature, but it's not merely knowing a nature will help you. But the way others should know more the nature who are detrimental, who are deteriorating it. So to me, the time is that it is not the local community, the Himalayas and the rural should understand the nature. They know the nature, they're born with it. But those living in the urban areas, the way they are consuming, the gadgets they are using, the way the roads are flooded with the cars and the lifestyle, that is the reason why everybody is currently suffering. So I see that the ecology inclusive economy is the time we really need to think about. And that is how the rural community should also be empowered, because they are the only who grow the resources. The river, the forest, the soil, they come from the villages. Remember, it's any part of the world. And what is currently happening, the kind of urbanization we did, there is a migration. More than half of the world is now in the urban areas. Who will save farming? Who will do agriculture? Who will do the forest, river, glacier, and so on? And ultimately, the urban now Antarctica, or see the case of third polar, the Himalaya said, the glaciers are in threat. So the understanding of nature is not, I believe, anymore for us, but to them more who are causing the threat to the nature. And I place it as that it's an urbanization, the way we are doing, not understanding science of nature. We know we want to go Mars. We have already gone to the moon, but we do not know the nature. We do not know the way. We are not connected with the villages. We don't understand where from the nature comes ultimately. So to me, the nature, the Himalaya, we feel that it is a time that the nature principle, as I say, consumer must be contributed to be understood, and sustainability need to be defined. Stockholm in 1972 said sustainability. Let me know what is sustainable ever since. No river, no forest, no soil, and ultimately we reign after a so-called economy, GDP that is not again the sustainable. This Corona period, GDP has disappeared. So the issue is which sustainability we are talking.
Yeah.
So the sustainability only come when there is a subsistence, when it is a surplus, when you share it, then only you can become a sustainable. Currently we are. So nature is to be understood in a different way, not the way we are currently doing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshi. I'd love to hear also from Simrat, please, because we got into this question about who's doing the farming, and it'd be great to sort of get your inputs at this moment.
You're good. You're muted.
Hi. So I completely agree with what he just said. I think the future is now in looking at how we can make our cities more sustainable, how we can, I mean, I would like to give more positive, take a more positive take on it, just to be like, what are the things you could do in a city, just in terms of how we can live ethically or ecologically ethically within this industrial capitalist system. And I think there are ways we can do that now. I think just breaking out of that, like he said, the consumer mindset that, maybe if we spend less, we don't need to make as much. So you can make less money and you can spend less money, and ethical investments, and understanding the embodied energy of the things that we buy. Like, what's the actual value of that? Where did it come from? What did it take to get made? And the more we think about those things, or I think that's really important. And because cities are humans are community people, we're social animals, so living together in groups is normal for us. And so if food can be grown in the city, that's amazing energy wise. It doesn't need to be on a farm somewhere, and what's affecting them is not affecting us. So you start living according to the seasons. yeah, there's free cycling, there's so many things, barter systems, gift economy, it just comes from community, becoming friends with your neighbors. Your neighbor could have a full sun terrace and you've got a full shade balcony, and you can exchange your shaded herbs with their sun grown tomatoes. And we have that there are so many resources in a city. Waste is wealth in someone's eyes. So just exchanging our commodities. There's this thing called freecycle.org. It's in almost every city in the world, and you just exchange stuff. You just be like, I've got an extra desk and someone else has got an extra wire, and just I think those things can start happening within a city, and that's really where we need it to happen now. So I stay positive that people in the cities are becoming more aware of their consumptions and habits.
Thanks, Simrit. I was wondering if Lucas and Karina might want to add or join. Do you, in relationship to this, to other possibilities of consumption, and how do you see us? Are we a part of nature? How would you respond to that question?
Yes, I think here in Switzerland, if you would ask the people, they would say they're quite related to nature because the mountains are close. You can sit in the train and you're in half an hour somewhere on the mountaintop or something like that. But I think what we mostly do is that we consume the nature. We go there, we relax, we get a lot of energy there, which is quite nice, and we also love to do that. But it's also the question, what can we give back? What kind of energy do we also have to get into the nature, or to take the responsibility for the nature, not just taking and taking. So I think that's my question.
And I would like to add that there's a need to see us as humans as being part of the nature, because if we don't see us as part of the nature, we divide it and we see it from a bottom down view. So we see the nature as something that, as Karina mentioned, can be consumed. So I think we definitely need to see us as part of the nature, so we try to keep it sane.
Thank you for that. Thank you both. David, Laura, Mark, would you like to at this point give us a little bit? I wanted to ask this question about hopes and dreams, sort of looking into the future, and what makes you sort of be hopeful for the future, but also what makes you give up? What sort of lets you down? If there's moments, I'd love to hear from all three of you.
Who wants to start? Maybe I can. I really like what was just said before about like consuming the nature, because I kind of see that also a lot around here in Switzerland. For example, yesterday I was hiking in the mountains. Like, this is something I love to do, and I always ask myself the question like about infrastructure. For example, like the possibility that can be on that mountaintop, it's because there is a road to get there, or there is a ski lift, or there is a path that somebody has made for me. So I can be there just because we have built something to get there. So it's kind of too easy sometimes to reach like places that should be far away and that should be left like pristine or whatever. And for example, I think in Switzerland we have this kind of cliche of like pure mountains, and then when you dig a bit, you see that it's not the case at all. And I think what we should do is just like being, I don't know, like respectful about like what nature gave us. And I don't know, when I go hiking and I see a lot of trash on the way, like, I don't know, it just makes me really angry to, people, they just come here, they take their snacks out, they just leave the rest up there, and like who's gonna take that with afterwards? Somebody has got to clean for some other people. And yesterday that makes me really angry. Like I was there and I saw a lot of trash, and just like, I don't know, what if everybody plays part and do something, then it's gonna work. But if nobody does it, then it's not gonna work. So I don't know what we can do except like raising awareness, talking about that, like making people respect things. But yeah, I don't have a solution for that. But yeah, yesterday I was super angry about seeing stuff like that.
David, Mark?
Maybe the hope, because you ask about hope, and then also about
Yes.
something more negative, right? About the future. Not negative, but like, I think I can reply
Moments
to
of frustration, yeah.
Yeah, the frustration. I think the hope is that we see a general awareness coming, and more people. You also see that in the political party. So in Switzerland, the Green are rising. Of course, it stay like quite marginal, but I think you see that these movements are growing, and people really want to make real action. And I think through politics is one way. Of course, you can be activist as an artist and do stuff as individual, but it will never have an impact as big as it should. Because as you mentioned before, as we mentioned before, like the time is kind of a urgence. So yes. So yeah, I think that's the hope. Also today we hope that in Switzerland we are voting for the multinational company to be more responsible. And today is the result. Currently it seems like it's 50-50 because we will have the result a bit later today. But I think that's one way. Of course, you can argue that it will not change because those companies are so powerful. That's also the problem. Is as it was mentioned before, our capitalist system is so stuck in a way that it's super hard to make it move because of the interest of a few powerful company, I would say. So that's maybe more the negative aspect of we are still in a system that is very hard to move from its global point of view because how it's built, and also because of our personal comfort. Similar to what Laura was saying about going to the mountain, we need this comfortable infrastructure to consume it. And if we shift that perspective, maybe it's one positive step. Yes.
Thanks for that. Mark, did you want to add to that?
It's hard to add something after what they said. I think, yeah, one thing I wanted to add is like, yeah, I'm really afraid of what Laura said about, she was angry yesterday about discovering in Switzerland like some trash in the mountains, because we, since we were born, I think, we are raised in this link to nature, because in Switzerland you don't have like huge cities, you're always like really nearby nature, so you're like awareness since you are young. And we have learned now to a lot of stuff about nature, about how to protect it, about how to keep it clean, about a lot of stuff about huge companies and all this stuff. And we know everything, and still we don't manage to keep the mountain clean. And it's so strange because it's so easy. So if this is easy for us as small people, why it doesn't work? And also something that is always bothering me a lot is like we have so much pressure on us as individuals to like, yeah, it's our role to do something, it's our role to clean the mountain, it's our role to keep it everything nice and to be aware, etc. But yeah, we are only small individuals, and huge companies in one day they can just destroy the works that you can make all your life. Yes. Yeah, so this is maybe the negative aspect. And yeah, I'm really happy about this votation today, and yeah, because I'm ashamed to be like a paradise for Nestle or some kind of this company in Switzerland. But
yeah, thanks for that, Mark. I was wondering at this point if George wanted to pitch in, because George, a lot of your work also has to do with policy and policy making, and in engaging with these systems of power and nudging towards sort of positive change. I'd love to hear from you as well about sort of hopes and dreams. And
Well, first to say where I grew up in a small village in Switzerland, close to the Alps. City is called Thun. So landscape, water, mountains has always been, since my childhood, very, very close. And through my parents, which brought me also for, hikes and stuff like that, As an artist, I'm educated as a visual artist and as a musician. I was probably mostly influenced and brought back again to these big ecological issues when I lived in Finland for 6 years. So my relation to be part of forests, for instance, and water has been very strongly developed at this time. But the key experience was when I was in Russia, in the Soviet Union time, at this time when the accident from Chernobyl happened. And that's sort of like, in terms of perception, a key experience, because you knew something happens, but you can see it, you can smell it, and this certainly had to do something with perception. So for me as an artist, I was getting more and more aware about this very sensitive kind of issues. And this is sort of like the red line from all my work since then, all my big projects, including all the negotiations and debating at the UN climate conferences, and my work as a researcher at the universities and in all my installations. It is basically on this knowledge about that humanity really is in a critical junction. And we have to take responsibility. We have to know about interconnectedness. We are part of nature. So it makes me absolutely sick to see how we exploit through economic criteria the entire planet, be that raw materials, fossil energy, and so on and so. I know we all are very much aware about that. So, my point today as an ecological conscious person is really to question and to see the potential of culture, including the arts, as a major shaping force for sustainable issues. And that's why I mentioned today in my talk the role of culture and the arts within the Agenda 2030. And this is, of course, a total different approach as an artist. And it is, first of all, the point that art and culture, the aesthetics, are a form of knowledge which is equal valuable to, let's say, the economics, or let's say to the scientific knowledge. If you're talking about climate change, all the data from the IPCC reports, that's one knowledge form. But the artist form, which is including the aesthetics, including, let's say, the emotions and all these kind of subtle levels, are very, very equal important. And so all my efforts today as an artist are based on this, that art is a characteristic and indicator for change just as much as the politics are, or as, let's say, the natural sciences are. Because, I think the real mission of art is lying in this knowledge that we are equal to other forms of knowledge. And therefore, I include myself in all this, let's say, transdisciplinary big conferences like the COP21 in Paris, as an artist, because I'm very strongly persuaded that the voice of the arts or sensitivity towards nature can be a major part. And this is equal to the knowledge of indigenous people. I think the knowledge of indigenous people worldwide is most important as we are talking about climate change, about ecological consciousness. And therefore, I've been now working since 25, 30 years with people from remote areas in this world, indigenous people, First Nations in the USA or in Canada, or with the Sami in Finland, or with the Komi in the Northern Ural, and so on, because their knowledge is very, very valuable, and I think we should listen to them. So my point is actually, as an artist, first, we are observers, we are sensitive, we perceive this incredible urgency, what we are in, and we have to take our stand, we have to make a part, and we have to know, the ones who are the decision makers, the lobbyists, that the potentials of the arts and the philosophy, by the way, has to be included. We have to raise up our voice, because the value of culture is most absolutely necessarily. And this brings me back to a very important point, because we all could maybe sometimes also get very despair about these situations. We can talk about water, we can talk about climate change, about air pollution, the pollution of the oceans, and so on, agriculture not to mention, and so on. Yeah, we can get this despair. It can be, but on the other hand, I say, there's no time left for pessimism. We have the potential to change this, because if you're talking about sustainable development, who else, since you are the cause of it, who else could again also change it and repair it but we, the humans? And of course, the arts within this is a very, very important issue. And really, as we were talking about the new orientation of our entire system, which is based on monetary, economic, capitalistic systems, if we really question this, we have to start by ourselves. Really, we have to get back to the respect of Mother Nature. We have to really understand that we are part of it and not a counterpart. So that's all the motivation I'm working daily in my works.
Thanks so much for that, George. And I think respect was something that people did resonate in the last panel yesterday as well. I was wondering, Leonardo, if you wanted to come in at this point as well, and perhaps share with us the last action that you took in your life to align with your sort of desire for positive ecology.
Well, thank you very much. Now it feels a bit difficult after all the things that have been said, because there's so much to agree. I think some very important points from our perspective is the question of sensitivity, the question of especially community, because that's what we've been doing with our collective, to also create a sense of community, because I think that's something that we lack, especially because I would say we're going towards a society of individualization, where there's not that feeling anymore that we face that problem together. And also like this alienation, which in my idea is something very holistic, where we feel alienated from each other, from nature, from whatever surrounds us. So I think that is a very, very important topic in this question of climate change and the problems that we're facing. And about our activities, well, I think it's not, for us, I think it's like in a very, very daily basis, like what we contribute. And it's not really about talking about like this big event that we do and this is change making. I think it's also a question of humility and in everyday life try to change maybe something, also in our thinking of trying to connect more things and not have this very linear thinking that we as humanity somehow developed and is very rooted now, I guess, in our problem making. No, I mean like how to solve problems. So yes, I think.
No, thank you so much for that. And particularly because you spoke a little bit about moving away from thinking of individual actions, individuated actions, towards more sort of sustained notions of practice of life. I thought we could get in some inputs from Aruna, because Aruna, you do a lot of work in terms of communicating with the larger public, a lot of the things that are happening in India. It'd be great to hear from you at this point. And I was also sort of, again, looking at community, I was looking at your question in the chat about the difference between sort of constant participation with a democracy and being able to vote on legislations as they're being passed. If you wanted to give your input, and after that, perhaps we could also have Blanca.
Just to sort of my own journey has been tracing my footprint of consumption as an upper class woman of medium privilege, but still privileged, and in terms of where is my footprint in terms of energy, water, but using that, and that's taken me on a journey of looking at mining, coal, energy systems, things that are not necessarily black and white, where you do have communities who are dependent, where industry has decimated everything else. And you are still dependent on the industry. Now, as much as that shift to renewables is something that's being pushed, how is it going to play out for communities who are already disenfranchised, and we keep saying that, but they continue to be getting pushed further and further to the edge. Seeing that they don't really have, in terms of how the government defines it as national interest. So in terms of national interest, we're able to connect on this call today. That's sort of what's powering it, by people, by the violence of people being pushed off their lands. A lot of the participants in India, you're going to be getting, since 70% of our energy comes from coal. So it's likely that some of this is from coal from these lands where people have had no say, and you can just issue 3 notices in a paper and their land is yours till the end of time. So this lack of agency, where direct democracy is something where I look at my brother who's a journalist in Switzerland, and we talk about direct democracy, and how, of course, there are, in terms of vetoes and people being able to, yes, you never know that what the masses will decide to vote for, but then there is also this part of it which is an option, and especially with as much access to both information as well as literacy. Of course, there's misinformation, there are nationalist and otherwise in terms of concerns, so you never know necessarily what will get pushed, versus having absolutely no say. So I think in the last 4 years or 5 years, well, has it been 6 years? Yes, in the last 6 years, the major push has been to undo legislation which allows for public participation in decision making, which is around consultation and consent. So we don't believe in the word consent, which is why, crimes against women are also normalized, where marital rape is not a crime. Then again, taking people's land without their consent is not a crime. But also connecting it to the policy level, where, of course, I come to the UN climate talks, and looking at fossil fuel finance, I also analyze countries' footprints and so on and so forth, where you realize that, okay, we're not necessarily the worst guys in the room, where countries like Switzerland or countries like the US, in terms of your historical responsibility of emissions, and also like for a large amount of the products that are imported, you have your exported emissions. We might be talking about trash on the mountainside, but of course, Switzerland has emissions responsibility far beyond this particular time, and its footprint extends far beyond its own borders. Yeah, which is interesting, and seeing how that sort of plays out in terms of companies. Now, a Swiss company, Holcim, has operations. Cement companies again have operations the rest of the world. So yeah, which is and how do you hold them to account? So looking and exploring those systems, and of course, what gives me momentum is, of course, there are trade unions like industrial helped communities in central India, indigenous communities, be able to get in touch with Holcim's representatives and the Swiss national contact points and seek justice. There was also Sudha Bharadwaj, who was an Indian human rights defender and advocate, who's been in jail for two years now, and she's one of my mentors, which they pushed. So to be able to have this sort of transnational collaboration between movements, and building this so that you can challenge power and access power in different parts of the world. We do still count on, as the East becomes, or as we grow even more. Now we're drawing hope from the fact that, okay, if there's a Joe Biden in power, that might make our government behave or feel slightly ashamed for its human rights excesses or for its environmental excesses. So yeah, there's a contention with and I think, which is why you need to build those from the local to the national to the global, and alliances that challenge power. And this sort of course, yes, the personal and looking at our footprint in terms of trash, all of that, of course, we want to be able to have an environment to live in, and everyone does want to play a part. The more disconnected you feel from it, the less you care about it. But yeah, I do also hope that the hikers in and around Bern or in different parts of you see half of the Swiss Germans looking like they're ready to go on a hike in a moment's notice, also are tuned in to its wider footprint across the world, and where solidarity can actually be extended to communities beyond their borders. And just being host to the UN is not enough. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Aruna. I was just wondering if we could also get some inputs from Shikhar and Blanca at this point, as well, in continuation to the Shikhar, you were pointing in the chat a little bit, as well, about the role that panchayats could play in the coming years.
Yeah, but maybe I want to ask Blanca to go first, because last time also
yeah,
I
please
took
do.
the entire time.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to comment, well, for the ones that doesn't know me, I was born in Spain, but then I've been living in Europe, in Denmark, in different places, studying biotechnology. And talking about democracy, like one of the challenges we are facing here in Europe is that we have democracy, but actually if you get a look into it, and when it comes to get to very important decisions that are going to affect the people, like for example, I remember when we had to decide to go to the Iraq war or not, you know, it was the biggest demonstrations we had in Spain, and actually we were striking, like really pressuring the government, and we were not heard, and we went to war. So we have a democracy, but it is not really a real democracy that is listening to the people. And that is why I believe in here in Europe in citizens' assembly that are done by a sortation method. We have the example of France that have already put in place the citizens' assembly, but it's not really a representation of the society itself. So I think there is a lot of work to do. I'm very positive about the people, and I'm very positive about all the rising movements that we have here in Europe that are doing mass civil disobedience to shut the system down. And that's my thoughts, and I pass it to you, Shik.
Yeah, so yeah, I think just that concept of citizens' assemblies or grassroots up democracy. I mean, in the case of India, it's very interesting because technically our constitution, I think, okay, I'm not an expert on the constitution, so don't quote me, but does mandate a very robust federated system where people on the grounds make decisions about things that impact them somehow, or maybe it's not, somehow it's very obvious, but it has been deliberately watered down over the last 70-ish years of us having a constitution. And yeah, I mean, I just learned that there are panchayati elections happen, and the panchayat is like the most fundamental unit of the federal Indian democratic system, from one of the participants in the other room. And she was in a village in Kerala. So it's, I think in India, with regards to direct democracy, it's a conversation that needs to be really blown up, I think, especially amongst people who are involved in academia, who are involved in places where panchayat sort of has left our imagination, kind of what Aruna was referring to in a way. And I think there's a need for us in these privileged spaces to work on providing that kind of support without taking over grassroots resistances, whether it's in terms of transnational advocacy networks, whether it's in terms of connecting these grassroots movements with the kind of tools and resources that enable them to reclaim the power. I think because it has become obvious that we cannot depend on our elected rulers, so to speak, for anything right now, and we have to reclaim. Or at least when I say we, I'm talking about Indian people, but of course I'm not the same as someone who's constantly fighting against the oppressive systems. But yeah, I think reclaiming power, just starting to do democratic assemblies, that's also what XR India has one of its goals as, so it'll be very awesome to talk to others who are interested in similar ideas.
Thanks so much, Blanca. And And Shikhar, I was wondering, Simrit, because you were speaking a little bit about sort of working from ground up, but also as an individual, right? Like this relationship between being part of a larger community, from the panchayats to sort of the governments. There's also a lot that we can do as individuals, and I'd love to hear from both from you, Simrit, and after that, perhaps Vanessa, with this relationship that sort of shifts when you begin to work with nature, very much as an individual, hands-on. If you want to expand on that, or to
I mean, I'm a farmer. I didn't mention this. I'm a farmer. I live in South India in Kodaikanal. I live in a really small village there, and it's interesting. You spoke about the panchayat system. I personally don't. I prefer the bottom-up approach. It's too large and it's too systemic to, I find, to try to dismantle that. And I think dismantling it from the bottom seems to be more of an organic space. Also, like it's kind of more natural instead of fighting against it. Because also, which we don't realize is that we are our wallets is how we vote now. So where we spend our money and who we give that money to, that's a huge responsibility that we have. But having said that, I just wanted to say, like, because it started getting a little dreary, and I just wanted to say that because, you know, I found me making that move to decide to become a farmer and go against the odds, and, you know, people in the village trying to get them to understand where I'm coming from, like a city urban woman. They are very closed to that kind of change, the villagers and farmers themselves. So even if we got the way that they understood where I'm coming from is, once there was a drought and then my farm was the only one that still had green grass, and they all would make fun of me, like, why are you doing these swales? We don't understand these trenches. This is how it's supposed to be done. And then when they saw that I'm the only one with grass, and I invited them to bring their cows to graze on my land because they didn't have any space, that's how the change took place. They kind of understood where I'm coming from. And I feel like that's a more organic way to create change, rather than a panchayat telling them, do it like this. They wouldn't even, I mean, the chemical revolution is so ingrained into our Indian agricultural system. It's not like the farmers would be asking the panchayat to do that kind of change, you know. And I just feel like us as individuals have so much power to make a difference just by what your choices are, can inspire the next human being. And if you're having a good time doing it, then that's all the more reason why. I'm just saying, compared to being an activist and being getting pulled down by that and feeling that you have to fight against this huge enemy, rather than doing that, just living a more authentic life to ourselves as we as part of nature ourselves, and, you know, makes us happy. And that's really what people get away from when they come to my farm to learn farming. What they get away from it is, wow, someone's done it and they're having a good time doing it, so it's not that difficult for me to do it, you know. And I think that kind of change is more organic and fun to say. But it's cool, I guess. You got to do all the political stuff as well.
Vanessa, I was wondering at this point if you wanted to speak a little bit, because I find that your practice has the potential also to change individuals' relationships with nature and biology just by sort of inquiring them with curiosities, and how one engages with that. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that in relation to action as an individual, what one could do in shifting one's relationship?
Yeah, I guess my background is very hybrid because I'm an engineer in industrial design. I worked 5 years in a heavy industry making unuseful, very expensive consumable products. And now I'm also an artist, and I'm part of a community that is practicing grassroots science and biology, democratizing scientific tools and biotechnology in order to have access to it for non-scientists and the general public, but also to foster very interesting discussions. And in this sense, I have the privilege to have this broad or like point of view and position myself. And first of all, I wanted to make a point about radicality, in the sense that we should be more responsible, and because we are privileged to have this educated point of view and conscious about what is happening. And of course, at an individual level, we can do so much. Like, what do we consume, how do we eat, how do we transport ourselves, etc., and how do we vote, of course, as well. But at individual level, in our families and friends circles, we can do so much. But also as an artist, one of the reasons why I decided to be an artist, because I wanted to have access to a broader public and have a voice, and to through my way of thinking, which is not as much as a technical thinker but more as a artist, to really get into the way we perceive the others. And for this, I think media, digital media, is so powerful, because actually the way we can see ourselves as part of the other, the way we can see ourselves as part of mass, as part of the community, of the ecology that we are part of, we don't see the others as others anymore. And like this technology that we have right now is not only to just make better cell phones or whatever. Like, through arts, we can do like immersive experiences, interactive experiences, sound experiences. We can storytell, we can make videos, very emotive, very powerful, to move hundreds and thousands of people to think one way or another, or maybe not make them think something, but to maybe suddenly broaden their point of view. And in that sense, I wanted to say what is very important to me as a researcher. I hybrid researchers in science and design, speculative design as well, is that science fiction is a super powerful tool. It's super political, and it helps us tell a lot of stories about the future, because imagining the future is political, and having the tools to shape that future is also political. And speculative design is maybe a tool. Art is a tool. Audiovisual is a tool. Like, all kinds of art are a very, very powerful tool. And the reason why I like speculative design is because, in that term of, so if we don't do anything, the future is how we project it. Easy. We can see the future in 20 years. We don't like that future. But if we speculate what we do have now, what is possible already now, but it's not maybe super easy to think about, but let's call the storytellers, let's call the experts in these matters, and let's make a story that can help the people to see the broader picture, or a future otherwise. That's why I really like speculative design and science fiction, because of that. And this is what I try to incorporate into my professional practice, and as well as I try to, as an individual and a member of my community, my family, my friends, try to really do small things, consume as I think, speak as I think, and vote as I think as well.
Thank you, Vanessa. Since you brought up a little bit, sort of, which is working with community and working with family, I was wondering if we could hear from KreativKonsum as well now, a little bit about, do you want to perhaps think and share with us a call to action that you'd like to share with either yourself, with your community, or with family? Because we often, I find, sometimes struggle communicating to those that are closest to us as well. And
yeah, exactly. So I really liked your point of view, Vanessa, because it was a very positive kind of outlook for the future, so that there still is hope. So we, as designers, as product designers, we normally, clients think or want us to know everything about every material, about technical possibilities, and so on. So that's not possible, because our knowledge is restricted. So we try to keep researching, asking questions, digging in the topics. So that's something that we would like to tell everybody to keep researching, keep asking questions, keep evolving.
Yes, and I think we have to come together and share our knowledge. It doesn't matter if you're a designer, artist, farmer, it doesn't matter. I think everybody has to tell something, and we can learn all from each other and can combine all this knowledge, even if it's sometimes hard to find the information you want to have. But I think all this, the internet and the social media has made it much easier, as you can see at this moment. And I think we should really use that, and yeah, there is hope.
Thank you both for that. I was wondering, Dr. Joshi, if you wanted to perhaps share a call to action as well for yourself, perhaps that you would like to share with the larger community, for your family. We have you on mute.
Okay. Hello.
Yes,
Am I audible?
Yes,
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I would like to add that we really need to understand the difference between the development and prosperity. There has never been a development in 400 years ago, 500 years ago. Prosperity had always been the only thing which the community used to say, whether this is trade, this garment, this kingdom is prosper or not. So really need to understand the difference between the two. Development looks something different, and development will never include so-called ecosystem other things. But prosperity eventually will include everything, your forest, your water, your everything. So there is a time where realize everyone, even the government to the panchayat to everyone. The development is the word which have been constantly using, unfortunately. If there will be a prosperity, we talk repeatedly, we would understand it is an inclusive growth. That is what I think. Largely, this prosperity word must be cultivated more seriously, not the development.
Great. That actually, oddly enough, links very well to the last question that I'd actually like to ask all the panelists, which is, what's the one word that you'd like to focus on, and what's the one word that you'd really like to forget? And perhaps I could begin with you, George. If you wanted to respond as well to something that Vanessa said or Aruna said, and perhaps after that you could share your one word to focus on and the one word to forget.
Well, okay. First, I would like to give an answer to Aruna, what she said as a statement, and this is, the issue, what she said about footprint. Yes, I mean, Switzerland is not an island. We have to be aware that she mentioned Holcim. Yes, of course, Switzerland includes in banking and in businesses like Holcim and so on, the big global business. So yes, we cannot exclude that, and we have to be critical about that. We have to be aware what this footprint also is creating somewhere else than in Switzerland. This romanticized image of this pure kind of Switzerland, I don't share this in the first place at all. Just to mention one thing, I'm just working on a research project, which is showing and researching all the effects which created from the industries back to the Vietnam War in the Swiss Alps. And you can find traces from Agent Orange, you can find DDT, you can find everything in glaciers in Switzerland. But okay, anyways, so the footprint, we have to be aware about this because it's all about interconnectedness. We are totally interconnected in all these many different kind of layers. And because of this interconnectedness, yes, we have to be aware what the effect is, what you do in some other part of this world, and therefore, being aware. And that's something I feel from all of us in this discussion, which is giving me very much hope about this awareness about the vulnerability of our world at the moment, and this urgent understanding that all in our fields, whatever, designer, artists, scientists, that we have to be aware about this interconnectedness and taking responsibility for that. So this is an ethical issue as well. And, through that, and through this knowledge of vulnerability, we have to be also aware that And that's also what Aruna also still mentioned in the end is, why would an artist include himself in a debate from the UN or something like that, So it's simply because of that. As an artist, as a sensitive, holistic, working person, a human being, I don't want to leave these decisions and powers to all these decision makers and policy makers from mostly representing the economics and the industry and maybe a little bit the natural sciences. No, I don't want to leave them. I would like to, in a way, like an undercover agent, to include the knowledge of us creative people into these forms of discussions. But that's a hell of a hard and difficult way to do so. Believe me, being part of a delegation in the UN conference in Paris is very tricky because there is so much suspicions, there is so much misunderstanding. What is the rule? Why, in the first place, an artist will be included in such a debate? Yes, it's from the bottom up, but still, I don't want to leave this whole decisions for a viable world only to the policymakers and the politics. So I think the artist, we have something to say. So we raise up and we tell the voice we have and our talent, the creative approaches. And because, in many, many layers, I believe art matters, and art has even a lot to offer as it comes to, let's say, environmental humanities, in peacemaking, and in creating new perspectives for a sustainable future. So you see, I'm an idealist, and my final word certainly would be, yes, hope. We can do something.
So I suppose your word to sort of stay with is hope. What would be that one word that you'd like to remove from your vocabulary?
You're asking me again?
Yes, George.
Yes, okay, yeah. So one sentence. We are living in the ecological imperative, and within that imperative, within this fierce urgency of now, I say hope. We can do something. We hope by creative efforts.
Great, thank you
Art
for that.
matters.
Thanks, George. Leonardo, I was wondering if you wanted to add to that, because you spoke also about humility and about our place in this larger picture. If you want to comment a little bit and perhaps distill to the one word that you think that we should forget and the one word that you think we should stay with us.
Yeah, I really liked also before what Vanessa said, because imagining something, especially in the fields of science fiction, needs a lot of creativity, needs this ability to think something that we don't have yet, and this is also like something which inhabits in hope. And I think for that we also have to rethink how we think. So what I said before with the linear thinking, something like Deleuze or Guattari have suggested with the rhizomatic thinking is something that we could take into our journey. And I would say like something which I always somehow felt was in the way of getting into action and get active is indifference. And there's actually one book which I really like from Erich Fromm, where he says that where indifference is, there is no life. And I think that's something that we have to get rid of.
Thanks so much for that. So I'd love for Shikhar and Blanca to follow up on that and share with us one word to focus on and one word to forget from our vocabularies. And also if the other panelists could think about their contributions to that question.
So one word that really is stuck for me is this word like pluriverse and pluriversal futures. I think that is really what is needed right now. And there's this other word related to that called senti pensar that is used in Latin America. That means to think as one, I think, or to think as we feel. I don't know if I can translate it, but it's like to feel and think at the same time. So I think those are two words that I think we should all think about more. And I think one word to leave behind is disempowered. I feel like, as someone else brought up, like we all have the power, we all have the knowledge, we all have the right stories, and we need to help each other forget that we are disempowered, because often it can feel very, very pressing. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Blanca.
Yes, it's gonna be 2 words for the positive one. I would like to hear more about, well, regeneration, regeneration of cultures, regeneration of the systems, etc., etc. And then one word I would like to stop using that I've been using a lot this last month is fascism. Like, I don't know if you are aware, 1 month ago, the extreme right in Spain tried to shut down our government and take over. And I'm using a lot like the extreme right, the rise of the fascism, and I wish I could take that out of my vocabulary. Thank you.
And wish them away along with that word. I think we all share that in common. I would love also now, perhaps, if Mark and Laura and I'm sorry, David, I was looking for you there. If you could also leave with us your 2 words, one to forget and one to stay with. Mark, I'm sorry, you're not. You're on mute.
Yeah, I can say a word to keep for me, because one of the main elements that was shared here was like the sharing of information from us to local groups to maybe more after that, to share first to our families, for me it's always the most difficult stuff, to share things and to trust a lot about what we share. And so maybe sharing for me would be the word, because with you already was really interesting. So yeah, sharing.
Laura, David?
For me, I will choose. Sorry. Again. I will choose a common word, because I think Lee was mentioning that one of the issue is the fact that the rise of individuality is also the cause, the main cause of this problem. And I would like to share, there is a nice, interesting book. It's in French from Eric Sadin. I can translate it in English. It's a bit sort of a cynic. It's called The Era of the Individual Tyrann and the End of a Common World. So it's a bit explaining that, and I think we should really focus on having this common vision, and I think sharing, as Mark was mentioning, is one way to accede. To make it happen also through art. I think it's and culture.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, David. Laura.
I would completely to say just act, like do stuff, like even if it's just a small contribution, it's still better than doing nothing. And I think as individual we are more powerful than we think. Like we kind of vote every day with our action, like what we choose to use as a service, where we choose to go on holiday, if we choose to vote this or not. I think even small action can have an impact. I think now more than it has ever been before, we can communicate to a lot of people with like the media we have access to, like we can speak, we can do stuff. So just share, act, do stuff. And the word I would stop using is like having the fear of technology or stuff. Like, I mean, it's not meant to end in a bad way. I mean, if we do something, it will just be better. So okay.
Thank you for that. Simrat, would you like to go next? One word to remember and one word to forget.
Actually, my words are really similar to Laura's. My word was bravery. I just think that it takes some amount of bravery to break out of the system that we are in. I just feel for myself, like the way I bring up my daughter, there's so much from mainstream society about how she should be educated or taken care of medically, and I found that it takes some amount of bravery to go against that and have some conviction in my beliefs. So yeah, I think bravery is important just for people to go out there and make that change that they think that they can't do, but I think you can. And I think once you do that, your life becomes so much more. Yeah. So the word I wanted to remove was like anxiety or eco anxiety, just because I feel like when you're doing the most that you can do, there's no space for anxiety because you know you're doing your best. So that's all we can ever do anyway. The future's always a question mark. So yeah, those are my words.
Thanks for that, Samrit. Lucas, Karina, would you like to go next? One word to remember, one word to forget.
Yeah. So I would really like to use more the word of reducing the things, the resources we use. We need reducing the products we buy, reducing the space we need, and vice versa. Growth. We should reduce growth. So that's a word, the economic growth, I would like to hear less, because our whole capitalistic system is just based on growing, and we live on a finite planet with the resources aren't infinite, so growth can't be the solution. So I would like to go back to Mark, whose word was sharing, and I think that's like the link between this.
Yes, maybe here I can jump in, because for me the word was I wanted to not use anymore is egoism, which is quite related to that, to the money and to the growth. And on the other hand, I think it was for me the togetherness and also this sharing of knowledge, of goods, of coming closer together.
Thank you both. Vanessa, how about your two words?
One word that I would like to erase is human exceptionalism. The belief that we are above the hierarchy between species and beings, and the intrinsic belief that we can fix everything with technology, which is not true. I mean, this is what I think. And the word that I would like to include is hope punk. It's a science fiction genre. It's a little bit different from this techno-capitalistic centered in the capital kind of science fiction, but a little bit more feminist, eco-conscious, and hopeful way of looking at the future.
Thank you for that. Aruna, how about your two words?
Tough one. The word that I do want for us to keep, or actually, wait, let me do this the other way around. The word that I want to see less of is projection. We have, and especially I've been thinking a lot about it in terms of social media culture, and as a kid of the internet and one of its greater evangelists, and who I do believe that it has changed our world, and also it makes for interesting forms of activism. But I am currently inhabiting two different worlds of activism, where a lot of the people that I used to work with are currently in jail for doing and working, focusing on the second word, which I want to keep, which is community. So yeah, I mean, just relating it one to the other, the projection part of it is, you see so much of this function of, okay, I am environmentally conscious, I buy this, I do that, I'm going to share this meme, which is, of course, and I think memes are the revolution, and that's really important. But so much of this is also in terms of our sharing has become is confined to the digital. And our sharing and our caring has become so much in terms of, okay, talk to each other, yes, or share nihilistic or existential memes, brilliant. And I think, but these are some of the weapons of the weak. So sometimes we think that we're activists, and like I've heard Simrit use the word, or saying that, okay, in terms of challenges of government, state, the entire system, so on and so forth. System change is essential, and it's good to see that being echoed. But the idea that it's become, the bar for activism has become so easy, where engaging in acts of quote tweeting or of slander or is one of the weapons of the weak, as James C. Scott is one of my favorite thinkers also describes it. Of course, there are various different ways in which people express their issues with power, but it should not be the only one. At one point in my life where I was extremely low and running out of, I'd gone from a coal mine to the UN climate talks and then come back deflated while people were debating over semicolons and commas. A friend of mine had sent to me something that was really, and he's now a part of the second word, because he's like, if the only thing we can imagine is the end of the world, then we have a very stunted imagination. So that pulled me out of a dark place. And the thing that's helped me the most is community. So that's the word that I want to preserve. And I sometimes look at right-wing groups. So when my grandfather passed away, and he was someone who had very different political beliefs from mine. His own kids found it difficult to come and visit. Strangely, you had people from these groups or from different wings who came to pay their respects. And I was like, this is how essentially the right wins, because again, there is, even though they know that this is insidious or whatever, that thing of actually showing up for people. And in the movements that I was part of on the left, or of looking at land and other resistance movements, what showing up actually means, and being there and being able to actually volunteer in numbers to show up more than in terms of likes and tweets. I know we all have our own bandwidth, but yeah, community is essential and extremely important, especially at a time of the pandemic, and where so many of us are alone and are sometimes just viewing posts, liking posts, sharing posts. We need to figure out other ways that we can be there for each other in what are difficult times. And that's going to be essential, especially with more natural disasters, and how do we think and have musical and creative spaces. So yeah, long-winded answer, but I hope it makes sense. Yeah.
No, that's great. And it's also great to sort of, in a way, end with this need for community, this need for sharing, this need for working together and working towards a desired future.
Yeah.
That we're all, in a way, sort of slowly nudging and building towards in different capacities and different disciplines. And I hope we can take these conversations forward together and individually in the future. Wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining us. And everybody that was with us live, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for your patience. I know we ran about 10 minutes over time. It was really lovely having all of you with us and be a part of our extended community. Thank you all so much.